Welcome back to Boxing on the Edge. I hope everyone's doing good. Today's video is going to be about what is the role of a boxing trainer. Now, before I get into this, if there's anyone out there going, what do you know about boxing, mate? You don't know nothing about boxing, who are you? Let me just explain the fortunate and honorable times I've had in New York City at some of the gyms and some of the trainers and fighters I've trained alongside, I'm just going to ramble and give you my stories on what I've seen throughout my years of boxing and obviously watching boxing. So I came to New York City in 2009 and I went to Gleasons Gym. Now, Gleasons Gym was a very famous gym. It still is. It's lost a little bit of its spark lately, just from the amount of world champions that are through there, but there's still some unbelievable trainers that still train out of there, and I'm going to get some interviews with them really soon, hopefully. So, you know, the likes of Yuri Foreman, who was a world champion, trained in there for a long time, and I was in there for like 6 or 7 years fighting as an amateur in the blue collar circuit, and was just, again, fortunate enough to be training alongside these guys. And I'm not name dropping here, I'm just merely giving you some background story as to what I was lucky enough to be exposed to. That's all it is. So Jarrell Miller was in there for a long time, actually, for like the whole time I was in there. Harry Kite, his trainer, he trained me for one of my fights. His partner Jihad Abdul Aziz trained me. He was my main trainer. He trained Tony Bellew for a couple of fights when he came over. Ashley Theophane came over. Paulie Malignaggi was at the tail end, but he really wasn't there, but he'd come back for some sparring. Juan Guzman is in there now. Don Saxby, a legendary Brooklyn trainer. Leon the Cat Taylor, who I'm trying to get interviews with both those guys. Hector Roca, who trained Arturo Gatti. Zab Judah was in there for a little bit, but like he would come with sparring mainly, but his family, his dad was in there quite a bit with their other family members and stuff. And all the fights that happened at Barclays were the pre-fight used to happen. Most of not pre-fight, the press conferences and all the workouts and stuff used to happen at Gleasons. So, and you know, an absolute plethora of world level boxers and trainers used to pass through there, and I would watch them like a hawk, because I was just very thirsty to learn. I still am. And, you know, I was privileged to be in the same room as these legendary boxers, you know, Bernard Hopkins, Deontay Wilder, Terence Crawford, Errol Spence, Eric Morales, like the list goes on, and I'm there watching these guys, watching, listening. Kenny Porter was in there with Sean Porter. They did some sparring. So I'm just relaying a lot of my information that I was lucky enough to see and to observe, and just through fighting and having to train myself. So I'm just gonna ramble today. So let's get started.
Boxing.
Okay, what is the role of a boxing trainer? Now, there's a lot of things to do, a lot of responsibilities a boxing trainer has for their fighter. Now, I'm assuming the responsibilities go up the higher up you go. Again, you know, I'm not privy to all the answers here, and if you have answers or some stories yourself, please leave them in the comment section. I'm very interested to hear on any level about any aspect of training. But you know, when you are a professional boxer, you have a trainer. What is their role? Okay, so obviously development is a very important factor. You know, injecting your style to a degree that isn't going to infringe upon the fighter's style. Does the shoe fit for both of you? Do you guys have a bond? Is there camaraderie there? Is there a you know, a natural connection, which I think is important. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to happen, but you find that I think the bonds with fighter and trainer tend to, you know, speak on it after, and it tends to be very important. You know, if you just look at Emmanuel Stewart Eddie Futch, you know, some of the most legendary trainers, and how their fighters speak on them. And, you know, Lennox Lewis used to say, you know, that the bond between trainer and fighter is very deep, and he's probably talking about Emmanuel Stewart. Andy Lee, you know, spoke on Emmanuel Stewart. Tyson Fury, obviously he's with Stewart's nephew now, so and he went to Kronk a long time ago, so there was always that connection, you know. Connection and bond are slightly different, because the bond grows when you have fights with your trainer. It has to, you know. You're both fighting. You're fighting for the trainer, but you know, you notice boxers, they use the word we. You know, when we had a good fight, or we did this, or we did that, it's because you're both in it. You know, you never hear a fighter really say, I did this, yeah, it was I put a great, you know. They always use the word we, and that's because the fight is being done together in the gym. And then yes, the fighter's fighting in the ring, but you're doing it together, and that's where the bond comes from. You know, and other aspects too, just the daily grind and training and camaraderie and all the other stuff. But I think a connection with your fighter is important, although not totally necessary. There's been plenty of examples in the past. I can't think of one off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's hundreds where, you know, there's not necessarily a connection, but they work for each other, and that's great. So developing a fighter, you know, is really important. And injecting your style, as I mentioned, you know, basically. But I think something that's missing these days, that I don't know if it's a concern, but like, you know, where is the teachers that, you know, would teach the mental side of boxing? You know, the Customatas and you know, Eddie Futches and Angelo Dundee, but specifically Customata, Emmanuel Stewart. You know, these were the teachers that had such a wealth of knowledge, you know, and just look at their energy and look at their wisdom and their body language. And these people absolutely love boxing. They're just like, they would do it, I feel like, without the paycheck. They'd be in there from 6 a.m. probably cleaning their own gym to 10 p.m. They probably spent every single day of their life in a boxing gym, and you can really tell. And those teachers teach the mental side of Virgil Hunter too. You know, obviously there's a lot more they do than that, but that's a big aspect of boxing training that is so important. You know, because fighters are quite sensitive, I'll be honest. They are. And they need, not all of them, but they do tend to need a little bit of, you know, not an arm around their shoulder, because I think that's a bit much, or some do, but fighters need attention. They need the guidance, the tutelage. They need the encouragement. You know, like boxing's so mentally driven. It's such a mental game that, you know, your trainer has to be there to keep you in check. You know, they have to provide that stability when you might not have it for yourself, or they might have to know you well to see if something's, you know, a little wrong, or if you're okay, or if, you know, I was watching an interview with Andre Rozier. Actually a great interview. I'll leave a link in the description. It was with him, Mark Tibbs, Dave Caldwell and Tony Sims, and they were having a candid discussion about boxing trainers, and it was great. And Rozier was saying, you know, when you have a close relationship with the fighter, you know, you're expected to be there for them all the time, outside the ring. If they have a family problem, if they have, you know, a health issue or something, you have to go to the hospital. And I can actually attest to this. I remember my trainer, you know, actually came down with a serious health injury, health issue, and I went to the hospital to visit him, and I know he would have done the same for me. And that's the extent of the bond, where you know, you have a tight relationship, but the trainers have to do that, and they might have, you know, it's a full-time job, you know, like you really have to care for these fighters, because boxing is a brutal sport, and navigating through the politics and all the darkness in the corruption and the sharks, and you know, it's like a game of snakes and ladders. And you know, the trainer has to guide the fighter through this. This is like a really important part of it. They have to, you know, besides the technical aspect of actually teaching boxers and refining their techniques and inputting your style and having them, you know, perform and develop their technique over and over, you have to be there and guide them, get them the right sparring. You know, don't get them sparring like, you know, and this is not necessarily professionals, but on any level, where don't put them in with people that you think they're going to get ironed out in, you know, that can be detrimental at a young fighter's early stages. And I mean really just in the amateurs. And you got to know when to push them and know when to pull them, know all the aspects of their traits, what they're good at and what they're not so good at, and all this plays a part. And you know, a boxing trainer don't just show up and you just teach them how to box. It's way deeper than that. You know, you have to be organized. You have to be organized as a trainer. Okay, how many times have you seen a fight on TV and the trainer doesn't even know what round it is? Like, this happens. It's not rare, but it's not too frequent, but it happens. Okay, so what do you think that's going to do to the fighter? Not everybody might be bothered by that, but some fighters will feel a certain way if your trainer doesn't know what round it is, or seems a bit disorganized, or shows up and there's no. But I've seen this in the amateur circuit. It's like the trainer doesn't even have the bucket to spit in, or they don't even have any tape. Where's the tape? They don't. Like, yeah, you got the tape. Like, no. Okay, that's a flaw. That's going to be detrimental on the fighter. And these are all little things that, you know, you might not think about as a trainer, but all these things, the fighter can't do all these things. You need the trainer to do that. So, you know, there's a lot of things that go on that trainers need to do on a daily basis. You know, they have such a responsibility. They gotta, like I said, get them the right sparring, the matchmaking too. Matchmakers obviously do the matchmaking, but the trainer is involved. The trainer's involved in that. They can't just approve. You know, they have to understand who this matchmaker's getting. Do they agree with it? Is it worth the risk? All this stuff. More responsibility for the fighter, for the trainer, excuse me. Then on fight day, they have a lot of responsibilities. Now, I don't know the extent of them because I haven't been there like that, but I can assure you they have to get a lot of things detailed out. They can't just show up themselves. They have a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, you know, whether it's, you know, dealing with certain situations, and then not to mention wrapping their hands properly and all this other stuff, and making sure the other fighters are having their hands wrapped. This is on a higher level, of course, but there's a lot of other things that need to go on. You need to be communicating with the manager. You need to be communicating with the team. You need to have things organized for your fighter so everything can run smoothly. And a lot of people in general aren't very organized, and that can trickle down. And you know, it's the professionalism in a boxing trainer that I think is really important. But the mental side of it, as I mentioned earlier, and if I didn't, I forgot, but the mental side of teaching a fighter, I think, is missing at the moment, or it's dying out. You know, when you think of trainers like Custom Mata and how deep mentally he would be, especially in like when he had Mike Tyson, or just his philosophy on how important the mental side of boxing was, and what he needed to do specifically with Tyson, regarding fear as well, and like not you know, leaving them out there too long by themselves. You know, he a father figure really. You you know, and Angelo Dundee as well. These are father figures, so it extends far further than just teaching someone how to box, because the mental side of keeping all your mental game intact is more important, you know, if you ask me. Boxing's a mental game, 75% roughly, give or take 5%, depending on who you ask, is, you know, it's a big ratio for such a violent physical combat sport, but it's all up here. And our trainers doing their homework on the other fighters, you know, at a professional level. Are you doing the film study to how to beat the opponent? So when you're done training, you've been training all day, are you taking the time to go home and watch tape hours and hours and hours and find the bad habits of the other fighters, your opponent? Because that is really important. And then come up with a game plan for your fighter to implement based off of you knowing your fighter and based off of what you've seen and what you found. For example, the most historic example I can think of is Eddie Futch when he trained Joe Frazier to beat Ali. You know, there were multiple things that the game plan involved, but one of the things was Ali, you know, threw a technically flawed uppercut, shall we say, the right uppercut in specifics. And, you know, Futch knew this. So, and he also knew that, you know, Joe Frazier had an amazing left hook. So they took advantage of Ali's flawed right uppercut. And that was part of the game plan too. That's actually how he dropped Ali. But there, you know, like I said, there were more to it. But that comes from a lot of film study. And yeah, you can just sit down and watch a fight. But how many times are you watching a fight? Can you watch it 3-4 times before where you see a fighter's mistake? And then when you see that fighter's mistake, are you going to work on it in the gym? Most probably do, you know. But as I said, trainers are disorganized. Trainers sometimes are also quite lazy. I'll be honest. Not all. This is the minority I'm talking about, but I have seen it where trainers get lazy and it affects the fighter. Okay, and if you're getting lazy doing the physical stuff and working on technique, are you really at home doing the film study? You know, so these are so many layers, and this is just my experience. It's a shallow one at that, but you know, I'm just trying to go off of what I've seen, and you know, I'm trying to really learn a bit more about training and the old school trainers too. I've always had a fascination about the old school trainers, and I'm going to try and watch more videos on that and bring that more to the channel because I think it's fascinating, as I said. But you know, the trainers have to get their fighter in the right frame of mind. You know, like come fight day, you know, is the fighter cheating outside the ring? You know, with the diet, you know, is the trainer going to know? You know, these are little things that you might not think about, but they all add up and all build up, you know. And is the trainer, if he knows, is he just going to let it be and get a paycheck? How much do they care? It's just I just love it. I love it. There's so much depth and dimension that goes into the role of a boxing trainer that, you know, I just wanted to do a video about it really. So that's probably it. And actually one more thing which I think is really important that I was going to mention earlier, and that is the famous quote is from Socrates. I forget, like, all I know is that I know nothing. All right, and that is an amazing quote, and that should be applied to anybody, especially, you know, anyone trying to better themselves at doing something. If you think you've figured it out and you know everything, then you've already lost, I think, because, you know, Wayne McCulloch, I was watching an interview with him, and he said that when he got to, Eddie Futch trained him for a little bit, he said, but he was already an Olympian and he'd already been decorated and had a good career, but he thought he, you know, knew everything, I think his own words were, but then he just realized that he didn't, but he was willing to learn. And trainers have to do that too. You know, each day you should be willing to actually learn from anybody and not be stubborn about it, or not be, you know, overly confident or too arrogant that you know everything, because there's so much to learn every day from so many different walks and so many different levels too. You know, even an amateur. I was kind of blown away the other day. I had a student of mine that said something, and I was like, wow, I didn't think of it like that, you know, and this kid's a beginner. And I was like, that's great, and I learned something from him. So you should never stop wanting to learn. So ultimately, a boxing trainer's got a hell of a lot of things to do. You know, they have to prepare their fighter. Like I mentioned, I'm going to do a quick summary. Prepare their fighter, develop technique, organize opponents, take care of the little things in the background, do the bit of the matchmaking, or at least, you know, be involved with it heavily. Pick the sparring, make sure their fighters are good. If there's any issues, they have to be there for them. You know, it goes on, and it's not easy. And then even fight day, you know, be organized, be prepared, be professional, you know, and want to learn. That is the key. And, you know, study the sport. A lot of fighters now, and maybe even some trainers, probably don't even watch boxing, which is shocking. Especially for trainers. I'm sure it's less trainers because they have to, but you know, it always blows my mind when there's a boxer that doesn't watch boxing. What? Anyway, that's enough for me today. It's quite a long video, so I just enjoy talking about this. And if you have any things to add, if you're a boxer, if you've been trained by anybody, throw it in the comments and let's talk about it. And I'll be doing more of these because I really enjoy these videos. I love talking about old school boxers and trainers and anything to do with boxing. But yeah, anyway, boxing on the edge. I hope you have a great week. Take care of yourself. I'll see you soon.